Well, happy Mother's Day to you and to yours. And today is a day that we gather every year to celebrate the mothers among us. But I also am fully aware that mothers are beyond what is birthed. Motherhood is a spirit. And many women have that spirit within them and bless others that aren't their own biological kids by the way that they love them and influence them. And so today we gather on this day to celebrate the way that the mothering spirit is this gift of God to the whole entire world, as well as this belief that God isn't just a dude. God is revealed to us as God as male and God as female. The Holy Spirit is always in the feminine. And this idea that God mothers us as well. And so for all of you moms here and for all of you ladies that exemplify this spirit, thank you. Thank you on behalf of all the children. Thank you on behalf of all the guys that can't do it. There's no amens. That's good. And thank you for you. And so today, as we begin, in your white pack in front of you, you should see a blue card. Any prayer requests that you may have later in the service as the offering plate comes by, you can drop that in or put it in the basket up on the calabash when you are ready. So today we begin a new sermon series in which we're looking into the idea of relationships. I shared last week that we have these care notes that we give out, and of the care notes that are taken, the most often the ones that are taken are the ones that deal with relationships. Because the reality of our lives is that relationships define us and they're a huge part of us. In fact, Brene Brown's book, Daring Greatly, in that book she makes this comment: connection is why we're here. We are hardwired to connect with others because it gives us purpose and meaning to our lives, and without it, there is suffering. We are a people that are naturally born to be connected to others. From the minute we take our first breath all the way until we take the last, we desire this sense of being connected to others, most often our family and the community, our tribe, the people that surround us, that define and help make us who we are. And yet, in this world of ours, in which we are the most connected generation in the history of humanity, how many of you are either on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? I don't know why that was Twitter. What's that one over business? I'm so bad at this. LinkedIn. How many of you are involved in one of those platforms or another one? Most of you. And what's amazing is that we are the most connected generation in the history of humanity. But did you know that we're also the most lonely generation in the history of humanity? A magazine called Slate says this: loneliness has doubled. 40% of adults in two recent surveys said that they were lonely, up from 20% in the 1980s. Increased loneliness actually has physical realities in our lives. Studies of elderly people in social isolation have concluded that those without adequate social interaction are twice as likely to die early. Did you get that? The increased mortality risk from loneliness is comparable to that of smoking and twice as dangerous as obesity. Loneliness. Social isolation impairs immune function and boosts inflammation, which can lead to arthritis, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. We literally, in our culture, are dying from loneliness. And loneliness is on the increase, not decrease, with the advent of social media. Because what has happened is that you can have 1,000 friends on Facebook and feel all alone in the world. That this technology that supposedly is helping us is actually hurting us. And hurting us in a way that causes more separation than bringing us together. One researcher from the University of Chicago says this: admitting that you are lonely in today's world is like holding a big L on your forehead. Anybody in high school do that to others? I found out it's a generational thing. What does the big L stand for? Loser. And so to admit that we're lonely seems like something is wrong with us, but 4 out of 10 people admit to being lonely in their lives, even when they are surrounded by people and are connected through social media. And so loneliness is a reality of our lives. And so for the next 6 weeks, we're going to explore what does it mean to be connected as individuals, as couples, as friends, and try to understand deeper levels of what it means to be in relationship with others. And so today we begin at the very beginning of where all relationships start. All relationships have the same thing in common. After 20 years of doing this ministry thing, I've heard from people that have been together a long, long time, like married 70 years, to people that are just beginning out in life and friendships. And the number one thing, the foundational part that you have to have is communication. Everybody say communication? We just communicated. The reality of any relationship is that communication is foundational to everything else. And so today we're going to talk about is the art of communication. How do we communicate effectively? Because we can communicate all the time and no one understands what we're talking about. And so George Bernard Shaw says it this way: the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has happened. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has happened. Have you ever said something to someone and they walk away and the thing that they report back, you're like, what? I didn't say that. Or maybe someone has taken something you said completely out of context, or the intent of what you were trying to say, they receive in a different way. Has anybody had bad communication in your life? If your hand isn't up, you're lying. We are not born with the ability to communicate effectively. We are all born with the ability to communicate, but what we find is that often our communication is lost in transition. That we lose the ability to effectively communicate what we feel and what we think the way that others might hear it. Let's do a little test. How many of you have ever been around someone that said, I'm fine? And what do you are already an expert at communication, right? When someone says, I'm fine, they're saying with their mouth, I'm fine, and with their language, they're saying, I'm not happy. And so we have learned how to pick up on each other's communication habits. In fact, experts will tell you that in communication, 93% of what you communicate is not with the words that you use, but it's in your tone and in your body language. Most of what you communicate is done through the nonverbal. That's why email sometimes is the worst imaginable way to communicate. Because I can never guess how someone is actually feeling through email. And when you put those emoji like smiley faces or sad faces, it doesn't really do justice to how you feel. And so communication, if it's 93% nonverbal and only 7% words, how we communicate is partly the words that we use, but also the way in which we deliver our communiques. My experience, and it's just me, is at times I think I've communicated effectively. I think that someone understands what I'm saying, and I come to later find out that they completely missed what I tried to say. And the challenges in relationships is that none of us do it perfectly. We all have room to grow. And what I've decided after talking to people of all different age spans is that you never stop growing. It's always an opportunity to grow some more. And so certainly the words that we share do impact those around us. Have you ever uttered something out into space and wished that you could run and grab those words and pull them back? And what happens when you throw out some of those cutting words to other people? Even though you may say, I'm sorry, those words have been uttered. And the people have received them and felt what was underneath of those words. So my hope today is that we can look to the scriptures to learn how to effectively communicate with each other, and that way we never have any more problems. Sound good? It would be the greatest sermon ever preached, even beyond the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus preached. Just to get your hopes up, I'm going to fail you. So this passage that Sam read is this book of Proverbs that are these wise sayings. Book of Proverbs for me is a book that I could read every day for the rest of my life and still not grasp the vastness of the wisdom within it. In fact, you could read a proverb a day, kind of like a fortune cookie, and try to meditate on it and allow it to sink in, to shape you, and still there's more room to yet grow. But in this specific passage, the writer of Proverbs is writing about communication and the wisdom of communicating effectively. And so the first thing that the writer says is that there's an art called discernment. Everybody say discernment? And discernment for us acts as a filter. How many of you ever wish there was a filter between what came out and what you thought? I've been there more often than I like to admit. The writer says this: the skilled mind is called discerning. The skilled mind is called discerning. In communication, oftentimes as we're speaking, our brains have this ability to start thinking as words come out. And discernment is this gift, this ability, this filter to slow down enough to think about what actually is getting ready to be said. Of being wise with the words that come out. And so some of these things, questions that are needed in our filtering, is are words needed right now? Do I need to say anything at all? When I first got married, I was guilty of the guy syndrome. Anybody else guilty of the guy syndrome? My wife would tell me something was bothering her, and I immediately went into, I will fix it for you. I will fix it and give you the 3 steps, and aren't you so lucky that you married me? Right? And I remember one time Kate said to me, David, all I need you to do is to be quiet and listen. Why? Because I just need to express how I'm feeling. I don't need you to fix it. I don't need you to give me steps. I just need you to listen. And it took, well, we've been married for 18 years. I'm still working on that. And that sometimes we naturally want to help others out of the goodness of who we are. But we need to be discerning enough to understand what it is that they're asking and if any words need to be said. Also, words have an ability to open conversation or to shut it down. Have you ever been in our conversation with a spouse, a friend, a colleague, in which the words create a wall of communication in which nothing can get over? Or maybe it's someone that knows how to ask a really good question that opens up the conversation to what really is going on. The discernment is an ability to understand, is this what we're really talking about? Or are we really talking about something else? And finding ways to open up the conversation instead of creating walls that split it. So the first gift of communication is learning the skill of discernment, the art of discernment, the filter. Secondly, the question must always reside within us. And for those of us that are married, this is so important. Will what I say uplift them or tear them down? Is what is getting ready to come out of my mouth going to lift them up, or is it going to cut them at the knees? If it's aiming to cut them at the knees, we no longer are following the way of Christ. The writer says this: pleasant words are flowing honey, sweet to the taste and healing to the bones. In the ancient world, they actually used honey not just for food, but for medicinal purposes. The idea is that honey is healing to the soul, to our bodies, to our lives. And our words are like honey. But in reality, there are times where our words are more like vinegar. And how many of you like to drink straight vinegar? If you do, God bless you. And so these words need to be something that heal and that bring wholeness, that soothe, that uplift the other. Or in other proverbs that I personally like about this, Proverbs 15:1, the tongue of the wise enhances knowledge, and the mouth of a fool gushes with stupidity. Did you hear that? The tongue of the wise enhances knowledge, and the mouth of the fool gushes with stupidity. Or Proverbs 16:28, destructive people produce conflict, and gossips alienate all those around them. You see, our words do matter, and how we use those words will either uplift those around us or they will cut them down. And if your aim is to cut people down, you've missed the whole point of being human. We are here and we need each other. And at times in our lives, people will hurt us, and how we respond is our choice. Do we go the way of Jesus in which we forgive? Or do we go the way of selfishness in which we try to get even or cut them down? This is true in marriage, in parenting, in co-worker situations, with friends, with neighbors. It's true wherever we go. Are we uplifting each other, or are we cutting each other down? Lastly, are my words aligned with my body and tone? Are my words aligned with my body and tone? If I say, I'm fine, and it clearly is not coming out that you're fine, how do we get to a place where we can converse in a way that it can be out in the open and grace can dwell with us? Oftentimes, I find that the body language, you can watch people from afar and know how they feel. Or if you're discerning enough, when you're sitting with them, you can watch their arms go like this. And what are they saying? I don't like you. I am closed off. I do not want to talk to you right now. Back off. And other times when they sit, we open up and say, I just don't understand. It's this opportunity to grow in the relationship. Without communication effectively done, it is impossible to have healthy relationships. Because what ends up happening is that we keep cutting each other down instead of building each other up. And the places that happens most is in our families. The reality is the people closest to us most often are our families. And they're the ones that we are harshest to, or we bless the most. It doesn't mean that you're going to do it perfectly, right? But when we're wrong, we're wrong. And our faith has always taught us that when we're wrong, we say, I'm sorry. Forgive me. For it is the way of Jesus. And so today, my hope is that we learn to be discerning, that we learn how to communicate effectively so that we can have beautiful, connected lives, and to realize that we're never going to do it perfectly, but grace abounds, and that we be gracious enough with each other that forgiveness and love win the day so that we can hear each other and know each other and love each other. So may you communicate effectively today and all the days ahead. Amen.